Hey everyone, today we're going to step into a story you've probably never heard told quite like this before. It's about a queen, no, a king, who ruled over mountains and myths, who commanded armies and built cathedrals, who faced down rebellions, foreign invaders, and even betrayal in the bedchamber. You're about to enter the world of Queen Tamar of Georgia, warrior, diplomat, and maybe even a saint. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I'm doing here. Wherever you're watching from, whatever time it is, maybe late afternoon in Tbilisi or early morning in San Diego, this story is about to take you back to a time of kingdoms carved into mountains, alliances sealed in candlelit halls, and a woman who defied every expectation of her world. Now, let's listen to the compelling story in this video of mine. You shuffle along the edge of a jagged cliffside, breathing in the thin, pine-scented air of the Caucasus Mountains. Below you, the roofs of a fortress town huddle under a morning mist, and beyond them, the ridges stretch like sleeping dragons toward the snowline. A hawk cries overhead. This is Georgia. No, not the one in America. The real Georgia. Medieval Georgia. And somewhere behind you, inside the cool stone corridors of the royal palace at Galati, a secret meeting is about to take place. The guards don't meet your eyes. You're just another courier, or maybe a curious monk or a wayward servant. Either way, you blend in as you step through a heavy door and into a chamber filled with tension. Candles flicker. A priest whispers a prayer in Old Georgian. You don't understand the words, but you understand the mood. Something big is happening. She sits at the far end of the room. Young. Tall. Dressed in gold-trimmed robes, but with no crown, no jewelry. Her face is mostly hidden behind a silk veil. Still, the air around her pulses with certainty, like you're in the presence of someone who already knows how this story ends. This is Tamar. Not yet famous, not yet feared. Just a royal daughter, barely past 20, navigating a world stacked against her. And this world is sharp. To your left stands a bishop. To your right, a nobleman with scars on his hand and contempt in his eyes. Across the table, another warlord clutches a goblet like it's a weapon. You hear whispers. She's too young. She's just a woman. She'll never survive. But she doesn't flinch. Outside, the kingdom hangs on a thread. The Seljuk Turks threaten from the south. Crusader states fumble and fall in the west. To the north, unruly mountain tribes pay tribute only when they feel like it. And inside, Georgia itself? Nobles grow fat, taxes run thin, and the memory of strong kings is fading into legend. Tamar doesn't speak much in that first scene. She listens, watches, but you sense it already. This isn't a girl about to be handed power. This is a woman about to take it. The meeting ends. The nobles leave, grumbling. You linger just a little too long, and Tamar's gaze flicks to you. It pins you to the stone floor like a spear. No words. Just one look that says, yes, I see you. I see everything. That's when it begins. You step back into the town as bells toll from the monastery tower. Peasants gather in markets with fresh bread and painted icons. Soldiers clank past in mismatched armor. And all around, rumors rise like steam from morning fires. They say she healed a sick priest with just a prayer. They say she dreams of rebuilding David's kingdom. They say she won't last a year. But legends are born this way, in whispers, in glimpses, in stories passed from shepherds to soldiers, from merchants to monks. And here, in the highlands of 12th century Georgia, a legend is about to become real. At night, you climb a slope behind the monastery. The stars are fierce and cold, and the wind hums with ancient songs. Below you, the town is just candlelight and shadow. You look to the palace. Tamar's window is lit. She's still awake. Maybe she's writing a letter. Maybe she's planning her first move. Maybe she's praying. Whatever she's doing, it's already working. The land listens. The nobles watch. The priests murmur. And you're just beginning to understand that this isn't going to be the story of a figurehead. It's not going to be a tale of a passive bride or a cloistered queen. No, this is going to be a ride through fire and politics, through war and poetry, through betrayal, miracles, and a woman who would be remembered not as a princess, but as a king. You turn back toward the valley. The mist is lifting, and somewhere, maybe not far, the first drumbeat of a future campaign thunders through a soldier's dream. You can feel it in your bones. The story has begun. You wake in a stone chamber, narrow window, cold floor, no fire lit. The palace hasn't warmed yet, but outside, the bells of Kutaisi already echo like commands. Servants shuffle past your door in hushed waves. It's the morning after a royal birth, and the queen's daughter has lived through the night. That alone is news. She was born into more than royal blood. She was born into a kingdom straining under the weight of expectation. Her name is Tamar, and from the very start, you realize something's different. You head to the chapel and press against the stone as the infant is baptized. The patriarch raises her, oils her brow, and speaks a blessing no one writes down, one too powerful to reduce to parchment. The priests chant. Courtiers look on with soft smiles, but you can see the calculation behind their eyes. Whose child is this, really, and what can be done with her? Her father, King George III, stands tall behind her. His beard is streaked with silver. His armor is dented, not from ceremony, but from war. He's no philosopher king. He's a survivor, and his survival has meant forcing unity on a country that barely wants to be one. Rebellions have been common. Nobles scheme like it's their birthright. And George? George rules like a man being hunted in his own throne room. You follow Tamar through childhood as she moves like a shadow behind her father, always watching, never quite safe. She's educated like any royal, sure, tutored in scripture, courtly protocol, languages. But there's an edge to it. Her mind sharpens quickly. By age 10, she's answering bishops with questions they don't expect. By 12, she can recite battle histories older than the cathedral she's standing in. But the country doesn't care about her education. What matters to them is succession. You're there when the talk begins. George has no male heir. None. Tamar is it. The murmurs grow louder. Can a woman rule? Would God allow it? Would the nobles? And that's when the fires start. You remember the smoke rising from noble estates as George cracks down on rebellion after rebellion. Tamar stands beside him during audiences, listening as her father banishes warlords, exiles bishops, and razes castles. She's barely a teenager, but she's already learning the price of power, not just the glory of it, the fire of it. The nobles push back harder. They call him a tyrant. They call her illegitimate. She sees it in their sneers, hears it in the way her name is spat like a challenge in council chambers. And still, she never blinks. You're in the palace courtyard when an envoy from the Seljuk Turks arrives, offering friendship with a side of tribute demands. Tamar listens from behind a curtain as her father shouts the messenger back toward the mountains. There's a lesson in that moment. Georgia bends for no empire. But the pressure builds. Whispers flood the court that George is sick, that he won't last the year. A rebellion explodes in the east. Noble houses begin shifting loyalties like pieces on a chessboard. You ride with Tamar and her father through mountain passes, watching fortresses change hands and oaths dissolve like mist. Then one night, it happens. A runner arrives breathless, another revolt, bigger this time. Backed by a confederation of nobles who think the king is too old and the heir too female. You look at George's face as the letter is read. He doesn't flinch, just hands it to Tamar. What would you do? He asks. She reads it once, twice, then she burns it. Let them come, she says. And they do. You stand on a wind-blasted ridge above a canyon where the royal army clashes with rebel forces. Swords flash, shields shatter. Tamar remains at the rear, not yet a commander, but she watches the lines like a general already in training. She doesn't cry. She doesn't pray. She just learns. The battle is brutal, and by the time it ends, the rebellion is crushed. Her father returns triumphant, but his cough has worsened. You start to see it in his eyes. He's not long for this world. He spends the next months preparing Tamar not with affection, but with instruction. You watch as he teaches her the rhythms of counsel, the art of holding power without seeming to grasp at it, the game of letting nobles think they've won even when they've lost. He builds her future like a fortress, stone by stone. At last, in the monastery of Galati, he makes the first of two radical moves. He publicly names Tamar his co-ruler, not princess, not consort. It's a move that sends tremors through every aristocratic hall in Georgia. A woman next to the king, in title, if not yet in function. You're there when it's announced, and you feel it ripple through the crowd like a coming storm. The nobles nod, but you know they're not ready. Not really. They're playing along because George still breathes. But what happens when he doesn't? You don't have to wait long. In the dead of a winter's night, George slips away. No trumpet sounds, no fanfare, Just a sudden, quiet silence that fills the palace. You follow Tamar into the cathedral the next morning. She kneels alone beside her father's body, lit by candles tall as spears. She prays not with tears, but with clenched hands. She doesn't just mourn him, she inherits him. And you can feel it. The torch has passed, whether anyone likes it or not. Outside, the nobles gather. They think they can control her. They think she's a figurehead. They think this is their chance. But she's been raised in fire. She's seen rebellion. She's smelled smoke. She's memorized the language of power. And as she rises from the altar, the weight of a kingdom already pressing down on her shoulders, you realize they're not ready for her. But she's ready for them. Baptized in power, raised in fire. You wake in a stone chamber, narrow window, cold floor, no fire lit. The palace hasn't warmed yet, but outside, the bells of Kutaisi already echo like commands. Servants shuffle past your door in hushed waves. It's the morning after a royal birth, and the queen's daughter has lived through the night. That alone is news. She was born into more than royal blood. She was born into a kingdom straining under the weight of expectation. Her name is Tamar, and from the very start, you realize something's different. You head to the chapel and press against the stone as the infant is baptized. The patriarch raises her, oils her brow, and speaks a blessing no one writes down, one too powerful to reduce to parchment. The priests chant. Courtiers look on with soft smiles, but you can see the calculation behind their eyes. Whose child is this really? And what can be done with her? Her father, King George III, stands tall behind her. His beard is streaked with silver. His armor is dented, not from ceremony, but from war. He's no philosopher king. He's a survivor, and his survival has meant forcing unity on a country that barely wants to be one. Rebellions have been common. Nobles scheme like it's their birthright. And George? George rules like a man being hunted in his own throne room. You follow Tamar through childhood as she moves like a shadow behind her father, always watching, never quite safe. She's educated like any royal, sure, tutored in scripture, courtly protocol, languages. But there's an edge to it. Her mind sharpens quickly. By age 10, she's answering bishops with questions they don't expect. By 12, she can recite battle histories older than the cathedral she's standing in. But the country doesn't care about her education. What matters to them is succession. You're there when the talk begins. George has no male heir. None. Tamar is it. The murmurs grow louder. Can a woman rule? Would God allow it? Would the nobles? And that's when the fires start. You remember the smoke rising from noble estates as George cracks down on rebellion after rebellion. Tamar stands beside him during audiences, listening as her father banishes warlords, exiles bishops, and razes castles. She's barely a teenager, but she's already learning the price of power. Not just the glory of it, the fire of it. The nobles push back harder. They call him a tyrant. They call her illegitimate. She sees it in their sneers, hears it in the way her name is spat like a challenge in council chambers. And still, she never blinks. You're in the palace courtyard when an envoy from the Seljuk Turks arrives, offering friendship with a side of tribute demands. Tamar listens from behind a curtain as her father shouts the messenger back toward the mountains. There's a lesson in that moment. Georgia bends for no empire. But the pressure builds. Whispers flood the court that George is sick, that he won't last the year. A rebellion explodes in the east. Noble houses begin shifting loyalties like pieces on a chessboard. You ride with Tamar and her father through mountain passes, watching fortresses change hands and oaths dissolve like mist. Then one night, it happens. A runner arrives breathless. Another revolt. Bigger this time. Backed by a confederation of nobles who think the king is too old and the heir too female. You look at George's face as the letter is read. He doesn't flinch, just hands it to Tamar. "What would you do?" he asks. She reads it once, twice. Then she burns it. "Let them come," she says. And they do. You stand on a wind-blasted ridge above a canyon where the royal army clashes with rebel forces. Swords flash. Shields shatter. Tamar remains at the rear, not yet a commander, mad, but she watches the lines like a general already in training. She doesn't cry. She doesn't pray. She just learns. The battle is brutal, and by the time it ends, the rebellion is crushed. Her father returns triumphant, but his cough has worsened. You start to see it in his eyes. He's not long for this world. He spends the next months preparing Tamar not with affection, but with instruction. You watch as he teaches her the rhythms of counsel, the art of holding power without seeming to grasp at it, the game of letting nobles think they've won even when they've lost. He builds her future like a fortress, stone by stone. At last, in the monastery of Galati, he makes the first of two radical moves. He publicly names Tamar his co-ruler. Not princess, not consort, co-ruler. It's a move that sends tremors through every aristocratic hall in Georgia. A woman next to the king, in title if not yet in function. You're there when it's announced, and you feel it ripple through the crowd like a coming storm. The nobles nod, but you know they're not ready. Not really. They're playing along because George still breathes. But what happens when he doesn't? You don't have to wait long. In the dead of a winter's night, George slips away. No trumpet sounds, no fanfare, just a sudden, quiet silence that fills the palace. You follow Tamar into the cathedral the next morning. She kneels alone beside her father's body, lit by candles tall as spears. She prays not with tears, but with clenched hands. She doesn't just mourn him, she inherits him, and you can feel it. The torch has passed, whether anyone likes it or not. Outside, the nobles gather. They think they can control her. They think she's a figurehead. They think this is their chance. But she's been raised in fire. She's seen rebellion. She's smelled smoke. She's memorized the language of power. And as she rises from the altar, the weight of a kingdom already pressing down on her shoulders, you realize they're not ready for her. But she's ready for them. The coronation that changed everything. You wake to drums echoing across the hills, low and slow like the heartbeat of a mountain. The town of Galati is wrapped in clouds, the kind that blur the boundary between earth and heaven. You make your way down crowded alleys where merchants, monks, soldiers, and pilgrims gather shoulder to shoulder, all murmuring the same thing. Today she is crowned. You push into the square, and it's like the entire kingdom has been poured into a single place. The air smells of incense and horse sweat, of newly baked bread and the oil they use to anoint kings. Everyone is looking toward the great stone cathedral, its doors shut tight. Inside, Tamar waits. But this isn't a typical coronation. It's not just about who wears the crown. It's about who owns the right to rule. Inside the cathedral, where candlelight flickers off golden icons, the ceremony begins in near silence. The high clergy surround her, eyes narrowed. Some of them supported her father. Some still resent him. All of them are unsure of what she truly is. A placeholder? A puppet? A bridge to a real king? You stand at the back, cloaked in the shadow of a marble pillar, barely breathing as the patriarch steps forward. This is the moment. The scroll is read aloud. The liturgy rolls across the stone walls. Tamar, daughter of George, blood of David the Builder, anointed not as queen, but as ha-mep, the Georgian word for king. Not a symbolic title, not a courtesy, a deliberate, thunderous statement. She is not being crowned the wife of a ruler. She is the ruler. You see the tremor ripple through the crowd of nobles and clergy. It's not just surprise, it's discomfort, confusion, even fear. You can hear it in the sudden silence. This woman, this young woman, has just claimed a title that doesn't belong to her gender by any tradition. And yet, no one stops it, because no one dares. The crown is placed on her head. It's the same one her ancestors wore into battle and into council. But now it rests on braids rather than a helm. Her robe is embroidered not just with crosses, but with verses, lines from scripture meant to echo divine right. Then comes the sword. A golden-hilted blade passed down through dynasties, polished to a mirror shine. She grips it with both hands, lifts it, not like decoration, but like she knows what it can do. You see how her back straightens, how her voice doesn't waver as she gives the coronation vow. Outside the cathedral, the doors swing open. Tamar steps into the sunlight as the crowd surges forward. Cheers erupt, but not from everyone. Some nobles clap with restraint, others not at all. You catch a whisper behind you. Let her wear the crown. It won't be long before we pick her replacement. They think this is a show. They think the real game will start after. But Tamar walks with steel in her spine and fire in her eyes. She's not playing at royalty. She is royalty. And she's learned the cost of power. Her father didn't raise her to smile for paintings. He raised her to rule. You follow her through the ceremonial parade. Horses, musicians, banners rippling like flames. But even amid the pageantry, you can feel the tension. Nobles ride beside her. offering shallow smiles. Priests mutter prayers as though asking for divine forgiveness, not divine blessing. The new king knows exactly what they're thinking, and she's already making her move. That night, back inside the palace, she calls a private council. You're there, standing near a carved pillar as lords, generals, and clerics gather, expecting to be handed governance like hungry dogs waiting for scraps. But Tamar does something they don't expect. She listens. She asks for advice. She flatters. She praises the loyal legacy of every man in the room. And just when they think she's soft, she issues her first decree, a sweeping renewal of the royal tax system, land grants revoked from disloyal families, a public works program announced for the reconstruction of a war-damaged province, funded directly by the crown, with nobles expected to donate voluntarily. And to the clergy? An edict of protection for monastic schools with strict oversight from her newly appointed court inspectors. You see the nobles blink, frown, some shift in their seats, but it's too early to push back. She's not giving them an enemy. They can't strike without looking like traitors. You leave the hall feeling it in your chest. She's not just stepping into power, she's reinventing it. In the following days, you travel the countryside. You listen to how the coronation is retold in taverns and temples. She looked like the Virgin Mary with a sword. King David reborn, only this time she's a woman. I saw her smile and command a general with the same breath. It spreads fast. Tamar the bold. Tamar the king. Tamar the chosen. But behind the curtain, her work has just begun. Not everyone accepts the coronation. Several powerful noble houses are already conspiring. You pass messengers on the road whispering to foreign courts. Maybe they can back a rival. Maybe the Seljuks will support a puppet. Maybe the Armenians will crown someone of their own. And Tamar? She knows. She's not naive, but she lets them plot because she's already planning how to break them, politically, militarily, or otherwise. You ride back into Kutaisi as spring approaches, and the roads are thick with pilgrims. Some are already calling her Tamar the Blessed. Others call her the King in Robes. You hear a traveling monk mutter a prediction. She will rule not just with justice, but with fire. He might be right, because that coronation wasn't just a ceremony. It was a warning. To the nobles, to foreign powers, to everyone watching. This woman is not your puppet. She is not your pawn. She is the king of Georgia now, and she intends to stay court of lions and vultures. You push open the great bronze doors of the palace, and the sound hits you first. Not music or laughter, but argument. Quiet, polite argument, dressed up in silk and incense, the kind of venom only nobles know how to serve. The air inside is heavy with heat and ambition, and you realize quickly, this is not a peaceful court. This is a jungle. You're in Tamar's great hall, and it's crawling with men who smile like wolves. Warlords with rings on every finger, priests with their own private armies, bureaucrats who claim loyalty but swap allegiance the moment it suits them. Each one bows when Tamar enters, but none of them kneel. Not really. She walks among them in gold-threaded robes, her face calm, her eyes calculating. You follow her gaze as it scans the room. She sees what you see. These men aren't courtiers. They're lions and vultures and hyenas circling a throne they don't believe belongs to her. Some challenge her outright. One noble, Lord Abuladze, puffs up his chest during a council meeting and demands more influence for his region. He throws tradition at her like a spear. No king rules without the blessing of his warriors. Others join in, passive-aggressively suggesting a male regent to guide the young king. The room stirs like a pot about to boil. Tamar doesn't raise her voice, doesn't flinch. She looks at Abuladze and says, "Would you rather take your argument to the people of your province?" The silence that follows is louder than any threat. That's her weapon. Not rage, but reason sharpened to a blade. You trail her through weeks of tense negotiations. She appoints allies carefully, promoting unknowns from lower nobility who owe her everything, bypassing the great families. It's a dangerous game, but it works. Her council starts to change shape. Fewer vultures, more hawks. In secret, you learn she's forming her own network. Trusted spies, loyal priests, foreign emissaries with no allegiance to Georgian factions. She's building a web beneath the court, and no one even notices until it's too late. But not all of it is strategy. You catch her once, late at night, pacing the garden alone. The moonlight catches on her cheek, and for a moment, she's not the king. She's just a woman fighting for space in a world carved by men. You hear her whisper a line from scripture. Then she squares her shoulders and returns to the throne room. And the next morning, she crushes a rebellion in the south without lifting a sword. How? By sending an army of letters. You ride with the messengers. Every lord in the region receives a personalized decree, reminding them of their oaths, their rights, and most cleverly, their future rewards under her rule. Within a week, the rebels dissolve like smoke. Not one arrow is fired. You start to see the palace change. The old guard narrows their eyes, but they stop speaking so freely. The new ministers carry themselves with more purpose. And the court, slowly, starts to believe that maybe, just maybe, this woman might actually pull it off. That belief grows when she makes a bold decision. She hosts a royal debate, inviting priests, nobles, poets, and philosophers to speak openly about the future of the realm. You sit in the packed cathedral stunned as Tamar stands in the pulpit and listens while men challenge her policies openly. One accuses her of abandoning tradition. Another claims she's too generous with royal lands. A third questions her refusal to take a husband. And then she answers, not with wrath, but with wisdom. Every response is a counterblow, calm but crushing. She uses history, scripture, even law to silence her critics. And when she's finished, the audience applauds, loudly. The vultures begin to retreat. One night, you find yourself at a feast in the palace, sitting among poets and generals as music fills the air. Tamar watches from the dais, expression unreadable. A visiting prince leans toward her and jokes about her needing a real man beside her throne. You hold your breath. She raises her goblet, smiles, and replies, "Perhaps. But for now, the kingdom sleeps soundly and the treasury overflows. Do your real men manage as much?" The table goes silent. The prince blushes. Tamar wins again. But victories like these don't come without cost. Tensions simmer. Assassins lurk. One morning, a servant is found dead with a forged royal seal in his pocket. Another day, Tamar's horse rears for no reason near a narrow cliff trail. It's brushed off as chance, but you know better. Still, she persists. Still, she rules. Because beneath her quiet exterior is a kind of fury, not loud, but enduring. A fury to prove that she belongs. Not as an exception, not as a placeholder, but as a sovereign. You sit once more in her hall as new visitors arrive, envoys from foreign courts, bishops from Antioch, merchants from Genoa, and you realize something. The vultures have stopped circling. Because this court now belongs to a lioness, and she's just getting started. First war and first victory. The wind howls down from the Caucasus as you ride, cloak snapping, breath crystallizing in the air. Ahead of you, banners whip in the breeze, deep crimson with the golden cross of Georgia gleaming at the center. You're part of an armed column, one of thousands. Soldiers on horseback, archers on foot, carts full of provisions. The Queen has declared war, or rather, they did first. You heard it yourself just weeks ago in the Great Hall. Word came that the rebellious province of Kakheti, backed by a faction of nobles loyal to the old power structure, has broken faith with the crown. They've stopped paying tribute. They've fortified their borders. They've raised their own leader. To them, Tamar's rule was always provisional, a temporary fiction until someone more fitting took control. They thought she wouldn't dare answer with steel. They were wrong. You ride beside Tamar's commander, Zakaria Makar Grzeli, one of her few truly loyal generals. A broad-shouldered warrior with a hawk's gaze and a lion's mane of hair, Zakaria speaks few words, but his loyalty is carved into the battlefield. Tamar raised him when others sneered. Now, he rides to repay that debt in blood. And Tamar? She stays behind, but not far. She travels with the second column, not as a figurehead, but as a presence. Her tent is the largest, not the most lavish. Her standard never falls. On the third night of the march, you pass a hillside where she stands alone beneath the stars, arms folded, lips moving in silent prayer. Or is it calculation? You realize then, this isn't just about reclaiming territory. This is about proving something. To the nobles, to her enemies, and to history. You reach the outskirts of the rebellious stronghold, a fortress clinging to the cliffs, thick walls glinting like dragon scales in the sun. The defenders are confident. They have archers, walls, and high ground. But what they don't have is Tamar. The siege begins. You feel it in your chest with every strike of the trebuchet, every war cry echoing across the valley. Days pass in sweat and fire. Then Tamar gives the order. Build a false retreat. You watch as Zakaria pulls back half the army, leaving tents and smoke behind. The defenders, thinking they've broken the siege, charge downhill, straight into an ambush. It's over in hours. You run across the battlefield, the air thick with dust and the sour bite of blood. Tamar appears on a ridge, flanked by monks and guards, not in armor, but in white robes, untouched by the fight. She raises her hand. The army falls silent. She declares not vengeance, but restoration. The captured nobles are given terms. Those who submit are pardoned. Those who resist are sent north, to monasteries in exile. Not prisons. Oblivion. You realize it's worse. They won't die. They'll disappear. Clever, cold, effective. You travel with her back to the capital. Along the way, people gather in every village. The peasants call her King Tamar. The soldiers sing her name like it's a battle hymn. Even the nobles begin to adjust their tone. Less arrogance, more measured praise. The whispers shift. She's no longer her father's daughter. She's her own king now. She won a war without a husband. That's dangerous. And it is. Because victory isn't just about borders. It's about momentum. And Tamar now holds it like a sword drawn halfway from its scabbard. Back in Kutaisi, a celebration erupts in the court. Feasts, wine, dancing. You watch Tamar sit at the center of it all, composed but not relaxed. She knows this win won't be enough. The rebellion was just one head of the Hydra. There will be more. Still, the victory has changed something in her. You see it in how she carries herself. Less hesitation, more command. She isn't waiting to be accepted anymore. She's forcing the world to accept her. At a private council meeting, one of the more stubborn nobles leans in and says with a smile, "A fine victory, Your Majesty. I see the crown fits you better than we feared." Tamar looks him in the eye and replies, "That was never your decision to make." You feel the shift like a crack in the ice. Something has broken open. A door, a wall, a future. Because now, every noble in the kingdom knows the truth. This isn't the reign of a placeholder. This is the beginning of an era. 6. The stranger she chose for love. You arrive at the palace one spring morning to find the air alive with gossip. Servants whisper in corridors, soldiers swap rumors at the gates, and even the monks at the cathedral walk with quicker steps. Something is happening. Or more precisely, someone is arriving. You hear it first from a courtier, fanning herself with theatrical disdain. He's a foreigner, a wild one, a noble without nobility. Another whispers, she chose him herself, without the council. That last part sticks with you. Tamar chose him. His name is Yuri Bogolyubsky, a Rus prince with the blood of warriors and a cloud of mystery following his boots. Exiled from his homeland, infamous for his charm, accused of everything from drunken brawls to battlefield brilliance, he's the type of man whose reputation outruns his shadow. You watch from a balcony as his caravan rolls through Kutaisi's gates, gold-braided tunic, massive shoulders, a face like a lion who's smiled at death too many times. He dismounts and bows, not to the nobles, not to the crowd, but straight toward the palace, straight toward Tamar. You're not in the chamber when she meets him for the first time, but you hear stories afterward. That she sat in silence for a full minute, letting him sweat. That he spoke first, not with courtly flattery, but with a soldier's directness. "I don't want your throne. I want you." And somehow, it worked. Within weeks, it's official. Tamar has chosen a consort. The court stumbles over itself, trying to catch up. The announcement is made with haste, but not without style. A royal wedding to unite the realms of the Caucasus and the Rus. It's spun as diplomacy, but everyone knows there's more to it. You watch the procession from the crowd. Tamar walks the aisle, not like a blushing bride, but like a monarch making a statement. This is not about love alone. It's about control. At the wedding feast, you sit with the scribes, watching the room closely. Yuri drinks deeply, talks loudly, laughs harder than anyone. He claps generals on the back. He calls bishops brothers. His presence fills the hall like a bonfire. And Tamar? She watches him, measured, amused, unreadable. For a time, things appear to work. Yuri takes to command like a bear to battle. He leads border raids, trains new cavalry units, gains favor with the younger warriors. You hear the soldiers say, "The queen picked a real man." And yet, you also hear more troubling things. Drunken nights, flash tempers, whispers of women visited in secret halls. Still, Tamar says nothing. Not publicly. Not at first. Then one night, you're walking near the monastery gardens when you hear shouting, Yuri's voice unmistakably slurred with drink. He storms past you, rage in his eyes. Tamar follows minutes later, face pale but jaw tight. She doesn't speak to you, but you can read the decision already forming behind her eyes. The next morning, the court wakes to silence. Yuri has been sent away. For military command, the royal notice says. But you know the truth. He's been exiled, quietly, surgically, without blood. The nobility is stunned. She cast out her own husband, one lord gasps at council. A king would never be so cold. But Tamar isn't a king like any before her. She chose Yuri, yes, and now she's chosen herself. You travel east for a while, away from court, hoping to clear your head of the noise. But even in distant towns, the story spreads. She married him for strength and exiled him for weakness. Some praise her courage. Others question her heart. But all agree, this queen is unlike any before her. Yuri doesn't go quietly. You hear that he stirs discontent among exiled nobles, tries to rally support from foreign courts, even plots a return. For a moment, the kingdom holds its breath. And Tamar? She stays calm. She fortifies the palace. She calls loyalists to her side. She moves her chess pieces without ever touching the board. When Yuri makes his move, marching with a small force toward Tbilisi, Tamar is ready. You ride with her army as it intercepts him in a narrow pass. There's no grand battle, no heroic duel, just a swift, decisive strike. Yuri is captured, disgraced, and, miraculously, spared. That's the final blow. Not the sword. The mercy. She sends him north. Not in chains, but in shame. Back in the capital, the court is stunned again. Tamar doesn't celebrate. She doesn't gloat. She just returns to ruling, stronger, sharper, alone, but not lonely. You sit once more at the palace steps as evening falls. The garden is quiet, the moon rises, and for the first time you understand, Tamar doesn't need a consort to validate her rule. She is the rule. And from this moment on, no one will ever mistake her crown for borrowed light again. Love, betrayal, and a quiet exile. The summer air in the capital turns thick with tension. Not the kind that precedes battle, but the heavy silence of something unspoken. You walk the halls of the palace, past polished columns and ivy-draped courtyards, and feel it in every glance, every measured phrase from court officials. They're watching, listening, wondering what comes next. Because Yuri Bogolyubsky, the man who once shared the throne with Tamar, is now gone. Not dead, not executed, exiled. But his shadow lingers. You hear his name whispered in the wrong places, among exiled nobles, among hard-drinking generals, even muttered in foreign tongues by suspicious ambassadors. He still carries weight, and worse, he still wants the crown. Tamar says little publicly. That's her power. Her silence isn't retreat, it's strategy. You see her at council sessions, elegant and composed, while nobles fumble through questions about the former consort. She gives them nothing, not rage, not regret, just calm. But behind closed doors, you witness a different Tamar. At night, she walks the candlelit halls alone. Her footsteps echo against the stone, steady and soft. You pass her once in the gardens, where she stands beneath an olive tree, one hand gripping a scroll from the eastern provinces, intel on Yuri's movements. She doesn't ask for your opinion. She already knows what must be done. The problem isn't just Yuri anymore. It's what his exile revealed. Cracks in the kingdom, loyalties not yet sealed. There are noble houses still bitter, whispering that no man should have been dismissed like that by a woman, even a queen. And then, Yuri makes his move. You get word on a late autumn morning as market bells chime in Kutaisi. Riders burst into the courtyard. A force has crossed the border. Yuri has returned, with allies. Armed with promises, old grudges, and gold from suspicious sources, a coalition of outlaws, mercenaries, and lords with axes to grind. You race to Tamar's war council. It's packed, generals, ministers, foreign advisors. Maps are unrolled. Voices rise. Some advise negotiation. Others demand immediate war. Tamar stands, and without raising her voice, ends the debate. He returns not as a prince, but as a traitor. We shall greet him accordingly. And so you march again. You ride alongside her newly fortified army, now tighter, better trained, more disciplined than before. Her general, Zakaria Makhargardzeli, is at her side again, eyes burning with loyalty and wrath. The soldiers chant her name not like a queen's, but like a commander's. In the plains of Shirvan, beneath a darkening sky, the armies clash. Yuri expected a fractured response. What he gets is swift coordination, lightning maneuvers, siege tactics he never saw during his days at court. You're close enough to see his banner fall. captured, again. But this time, something's different. Yuri looks older, bitter. The fire in his eyes is smoke now. You hear him shout as he's brought before Tamar. You needed me. You still need me. Tamar doesn't answer. Instead, she turns to the assembled nobles, the foreign emissaries watching from a safe distance, the entire kingdom watching through their eyes, and declares, "Let this be the end of this chapter. We do not build our kingdom with ghosts. No execution, no public humiliation." She has him taken to a remote monastery in the north, hidden away, not to punish, but to erase. That's how you destroy a threat in Georgia. You don't just kill it, you quiet it. And in doing so, you take the final word. Back in Kutaisi, the palace shifts again. Those who doubted her strength during the marriage now fall over themselves to prove loyalty. The poetry changes too. Minstrels, once afraid to speak of Yuri, now sing Tamar's name with fierce clarity. She ruled alone and ruled well. She cast out the storm and made the sky blue. She wears no ring, only the crown. And in time, that becomes her reputation. You sit with an old scribe in the cathedral library reading letters from foreign courts. One calls her a marvel among monarchs. Another calls her a king with the face of a queen. The Byzantine Empire sends gifts. Armenian princes send tribute. Because now the world understands. Tamar doesn't need a husband. She is her own dynasty. Still, the scars remain. Not visible ones, but scars of trust. From this moment on, Tamar grows sharper. Every decision more calculated, every alliance vetted, every appointment precise. But there's warmth too, directed not at nobles, but at her people, the poor, the monks, the orphans. You see her ride through the countryside, not in regal procession, but quietly, distributing food and commissioning hospitals. She doesn't close her heart, she just opens it on her terms. And so, the story of Tamar and Yuri becomes legend, a cautionary tale, a turning point. A reminder to every man in court that power shared with her is not yours. It is hers. Always was. Always will be. The king who conquered without leaving her throne. You're in the capital again, Kutaisi, radiant in spring, when the news arrives like thunder across marble floors. The city of Ani has surrendered, without a siege, without a drawn sword. Tamar hasn't left the palace in months, yet the map of Georgia is growing, expanding like ink across parchment. How? You step into the royal war chamber, now more of a strategy engine than a battlefield council. The room is filled with maps that change weekly. Colored markers show newly claimed cities, allied Armenian provinces, and once hostile strongholds that now bend the knee. You hear it murmured by generals and scribes alike. Tamar is no longer just defending Georgia. She's building an empire. But not through brute force alone. You watch the machine work. Messengers fly like hawks to distant courts. Secret envoys slip into Persian halls and Armenian cathedrals. Tamar's diplomacy is a weapon sharper than a saber. Where her father ruled with fire, she rules with architecture, laying down corridors of allegiance and staircases of trust. Her most powerful move? The creation of a new army, not just of Georgians, but a multi-ethnic legion of mountain tribesmen, Armenians, Kipchaks, and even Christian Turks. You meet them on the road, bronze-skinned cavalry with accents from a dozen provinces, each one wearing her crest on their tunic. They don't fight for Georgia. They fight for Tamar. You travel with a battalion east toward the Caspian frontier. The commander, a grizzled veteran named Ivan, explains it plainly. She gives land to the faithful and exile to the proud. That's a fair queen in my eyes. And what does Tamar do as her armies move? She writes edicts to monasteries in the highlands, commanding the restoration of frescoes and libraries, decrees for bridges, aqueducts, trade routes, royal patronage to poets who now shape her image in verse. The sun bows to Tamar before it touches the mountains. She is the mother of the righteous and the dread of tyrants. Back in court, you attend one of the queen's famed debates, a gathering of bishops, philosophers, and mathematicians. Yes, mathematicians. Because Tamar believes an empire needs not just walls and spears, but wisdom. She listens to a monk explain the geometry of fortification. Another describes how scriptural law might govern multi-faith provinces. Tamar doesn't rule as a woman desperate to prove herself. She rules as if she was born to do this. Because maybe she was. You travel south to Vaspurakan, where rebellion had stirred just months before. It's silent now. You ask a local priest why the people surrendered so quickly. He gestures to a newly repaired church. She rebuilt what her enemies destroyed, and she never taxed us twice for one loaf of bread. You begin to understand Tamar's magic. She defeats hatred with dignity, not fear. Her empire doesn't just conquer, it welcomes. But don't mistake kindness for softness. When a Seljuk emir threatens her frontier garrisons, she doesn't send envoys. She sends Zakaria Makargrzeli with a force of elite cavalry and an order, no negotiations. The emir vanishes from the chronicles. His fortresses become Tamar's granaries. In just a few years, Georgia absorbs the Armenian highlands, reclaims vast territories of the old Christian East, and stretches its reach toward the Caspian Sea. Trade flourishes, fortresses rise, and Tamar, still never seen in full battle dress, is now called in foreign courts the King of Kings, the defender of the faithful, and even in whispers from the jealous West, the heretic Queen of the East. She doesn't flinch. You sit beside her one night in the candlelit library as she copies a section from David the Builder's Chronicles. She pauses, looks up, and asks, "What is conquest, if not memory made permanent?" You don't answer. You don't need to, because you've seen it. This is not just war. This is legacy. Tamar's soldiers plant banners. Tamar's scribes record history. Tamar's architects carve her story into stone. And through it all, she never rides into battle herself, never swings a sword in public, never wears armor for spectacle. Yet her reach extends farther than any monarch in Georgian history. You ride back into Kutaisi on a rainy morning. The city is different now, wealthier, wiser. Temples of many faiths stand within walking distance. Roads are smooth with new paving. Foreign merchants speak Georgian. You glance at the old palace towers and remember when they whispered that she wouldn't last a year. Now, they call her Tamar the Great. And she hasn't even reached her peak, the battle that crowned a golden age. It's dawn, and you stand on a windswept plain near the fortress of Basian. The air smells of rain-soaked earth and oiled leather. Across the field, the enemy banners rise, red, black, and gold, fluttering above tens of thousands of men. This is no rebellion, no border skirmish. This is war on a scale you've never seen before, and it's personal. The Seljuk Sultan Rukn al-Din has declared that Tamar's victories threaten not just his territory, but the divine order. A woman ruling men? Expanding a Christian kingdom into Muslim territory? He sends word that he will crush the queen beneath her own crown. Tamar doesn't blink. You're in the war council when the message arrives. She reads it aloud, then sets the scroll down and says simply, "Let him try." But the threat is real. The Seljuk army is massive, one of the most powerful Islamic military forces of its time. It outnumbers Georgia's forces nearly 2-1. Its commanders are seasoned, its warriors fearless. And Tamar? Tamar stays in the capital, not out of fear, out of trust. Because she's not sending just an army, she's sending her brotherhood. Led by Zakaria and Ivan Makargrzeli, now legends in their own right, and composed of men who would rather die than let her name fall to the dust. As the troops prepare, you ride with them through winding mountain passes deep into the Anatolian frontier. You pass villages that have already surrendered, whose elders carry Tamar's edicts like sacred texts. She's conquered with compassion. But this time, she will win with fire. The night before the battle, the men gather around campfires. There's no laughter, just silence. And then, as if summoned by memory, one soldier stands and begins to sing a prayer, a hymn to Tamar. Others join him, softly, in 10 languages. It spreads through the hills like a holy current. You feel it crawl up your spine. She's not just a queen anymore. She's a symbol. And in the darkness beyond the fires, the enemy is waiting. Then comes the morning. You're mounted, shielded, the horizon still dark when the first war horn sounds. Georgian cavalry arcs wide to the left. Archers form behind ridges. And the main line holds steady. Then a sudden strike. Zakaria leads a fake retreat, drawing the Seljuk cavalry forward. They charge, furious, confident, and ride straight into a hidden gorge packed with Tamar's elite guard. The trap slams shut. From your vantage point, the dust explodes upward. The clash is thunder. Swords crash. Men scream. Horses rear. You watch as Ivan's infantry surges from behind a hill, flanking the Seljuk line with brutal precision. The enemy stumbles. Their formations buckle. You ride hard with the second line, sweeping through the gap. It's not just a battle, it's a reckoning. By noon, the plain is littered with broken lances and scattered shields. Seljuk standards fall one by one, and when their commanders retreat, their rearguard turns to find Tamar's horsemen already waiting. It's over. Bazian is not a victory. It is a statement. You return to Kutaisi weeks later, alongside the army, bloodied but unbroken. The gates open to thunderous cheers. Tamar stands above the square, not in royal robes but in a simple white gown, a silent symbol of something greater than herself. She raises no sword. She gives no triumphant speech. She simply nods. And the crowd roars louder than any battlefield. What follows in the months after is something historians still struggle to name. Not just peace, not just prosperity. A golden age. New roads open between the Black Sea and the Caspian. Trade flows from Byzantium to the Silk Road. Scholars from Antioch and Cairo arrive to study in Georgian monasteries. Poetry blooms like springtime in every corner of the kingdom. You walk the streets of Tbilisi and hear Greek, Armenian, Arabic, and Latin spoken freely in marketplaces that glitter with color and music. There's grain for the poor, stipends for widows, protection for all faiths. Tamar doesn't demand cultural loyalty. She demands justice. And it works. Foreign envoys line up in her court. Emperors send gifts. The Pope writes carefully, praising her piety, but avoiding any hint of condescension. And in the East, Muslim chroniclers write grudgingly respectful lines. The Queen of the Christians is not to be taken lightly. She is no longer questioned, not even by time. You find yourself in the Cathedral of Gilati one evening, staring up at a new fresco being painted across the ceiling. It's Tamar, not draped in royal vanity, but standing barefoot on the earth, arms open, a scroll in one hand and a sword in the other. That's what she's become. The scroll and the sword, the brain and the fist, the builder and the breaker, the woman and the king. And if Bassian proved anything, it's this. Tamar doesn't need to fight to win. She just needs the world to see what she already is, the queen who ruled heaven and earth. You step into the stone courtyard of Vardzia Monastery as the bells toll softly through the valley. Carved directly into the cliffside like veins of a sleeping giant, Vardzia isn't just a sanctuary. It's a monument, a message. Tamar's message. Because while the nobles praised her conquests and generals sang of her strategy, Tamar herself was building something eternal, a spiritual empire to match the political one. You walk through its sun-dappled corridors and realize this is not just a place to pray. It's the theater of faith, and the leading role is played by a queen. Monks glide past you, robes rustling like leaves, and every surface is alive with frescoes. One stops you in your tracks, a towering image of Tamar herself, not in crown or armor, but haloed like a saint. Not an artist's invention. This is her command. She commissions her image beside Christ and the Virgin, not as equal, but not far beneath. You're not the only one who notices. Whispers drift through the court. She seeks sainthood. She rules both crown and cross. Some praise it, others are uneasy. But Tamar doesn't care for balance sheets of approval. She sees the soul of the nation and knows it must outlast her sword. In her private quarters, you see the scrolls she studies, theological treatises, sermons, law codes, mystical writings. She doesn't just fund churches. She writes to bishops in remote provinces to ensure the poor have candles and priests have grain. She organizes synods, appoints archimandrites, and when a heresy blooms in the eastern hills, she sends not soldiers, but philosophers. Her power is soft, but total. You ride to a small mountain village once isolated by snow. Under Tamar's rule, a road has been cut through the stone. And what stands at the end? A school. A library. Children recite hymns in Georgian. Even their alphabet, the majestic, curling script, is treated as holy, a gift to be preserved. You realize Tamar isn't just preserving a kingdom. She's cultivating a civilization. And yet, she never claims divinity. She prays daily, fasts during Lent, walks barefoot into cathedrals on feast days. She wears gold to council, but linen to vespers. And when rumors circulate that foreign monarchs call her Saint of the Caucasus, she merely smiles and says, saints don't sit on thrones. Still, the line blurs. When a drought hits the western valleys and the crops begin to fail, she travels there herself. Not with military escort, but alone, with priests. She blesses the fields. Days later, rain falls. Coincidence? Maybe. But the people don't think so. In the towns and taverns, they call her king by law, queen by grace. They sing of her with reverence, usually reserved for martyrs. One poem, scratched onto a monastery wall, reads, "She prays for us before we ask. She forgives us before we kneel. She carries Georgia in her womb of light." And though Tamar would never say it aloud, you can tell she feels the weight of it, the expectation, the awe, the myth already forming around her bones. One night you catch a rare glimpse of her alone, no advisors, no crown, just Tamar and the stars, her face turned upward, lips moving silently. Is she praying? Questioning? Or asking what no king ever dares ask? Will it all last? Because she knows empires rise and fall, that stone cracks, that even holiness fades with time. So she builds something more. She creates a national liturgy, binding faith and state in shared rituals. She re-anchors laws in both scripture and custom, ensuring even the illiterate can understand their rights. She invites Armenian, Greek, and Assyrian clerics to her councils, weaving their knowledge into her legacy. And it works. By the turn of the century, Georgia is the beating heart of Orthodox Christendom in the East. Not Constantinople, not Antioch. Kutaisi. You return to the capital after months of travel and everything feels elevated. Not richer, righter. Guards recite prayers before duty. Tax collectors bring grain to monasteries before counting coins. Children study the Psalms alongside poetry. It's not just religion. It's culture, rewoven from every thread of the kingdom, embroidered with Tamar's vision. And yet, this is no theocracy. Tamar allows space for debate, dissent, otherness. Muslim and Jewish communities still thrive under her reign, protected by royal edict. Their temples are untouched, their rights upheld. You hear it often, spoken with quiet amazement. She rules with a sword wrapped in scripture. By now, even her critics in the West have fallen silent. Papal envoys arrive, curious and cautious. The Holy Roman Emperor sends a gift, a jeweled cross carved with Latin prayers. He includes a note, "To the queen who acts like a king and governs like a saint." She sends back a single coin, Georgia, undivided in the hand of God. And she means it, because now Tamar rules not just lands or laws, she rules hearts, souls, memory. You walk through the Cathedral of Svetskavli on a quiet day, and a boy lights a candle beneath her icon. His mother kneels beside him. "Who is she?" he asks. His mother whispers, "The queen who prayed for us when no one else would." And in that moment, you understand. Tamar didn't just rule heaven and earth, she wove them together. A daughter of fire and silk. Tamar's children and legacy. Yay! In the royal nursery now, a place rarely glimpsed even by those closest to the court. The air smells faintly of lavender and old wood. Sunlight pours through stained glass, painting the floor in reds and blues. And there, playing among tapestries and scrolls, are the children who carry Tamar's blood. Their names are George and Rusudan, a prince and a princess. But no one calls them that, not here. To their nurses, tutors, and guards, they are light and flame. The boy has his mother's eyes, steady, observant, a touch of sorrow hidden behind confidence. The girl, young though she is, already walks with chin high, spine straight. You see Tamar with them one morning, seated cross-legged on a woven carpet. No crown, no scepter, just a mother, teaching her son to read a psalm, brushing her daughter's hair with hands that have written treaties and signed death warrants. But motherhood, even for a monarch, is not without peril. You hear the concerns whispered at court. Will her son be weak from too much comfort? Can a daughter follow such a legacy without being crushed by it? Nobles speculate on succession. Foreign courts send spies, wrapped in silk and smiles, hoping to glimpse the future of Tamar's line. And Tamar? She listens. She waits. And she prepares. You accompany her to a secluded fortress near Akaltsike, where Prince George is being trained, not in etiquette, but in warfare. You see the young boy sweat under armor too heavy, stumble with sword drills, grimace under the cold stare of a Kipchak commander. But he gets back up, again and again, and Tamar, watching from the shadows, allows him to fall, because she knows her reign is gold. But the world her children will inherit will not be. Even now, dark clouds are gathering. Mongol raiders test the eastern frontiers. Byzantine politics shift with each emperor. Rumors of rising Turkish confederations buzz through the cities. And everyone is watching Georgia, not with admiration, but with greed. So Tamar doubles down. She creates a co-regency council in the event of her death, stacking it with loyalists and brilliant minds, men and women alike. You see her draft new inheritance laws, not just for her own children, but for the nation's sons and daughters. She appoints female governors in several regions, shocking the old guard once again. The message is clear. Legacy doesn't mean repetition. It means evolution. One night you sit beside her as she writes letters to each child. Not royal proclamations, personal ones. To George, she writes, "Remember that a throne is not a seat, but a burden. If you cannot carry it, you must not wear the crown." To Rusudan, "Your strength may be mistaken for softness. Let them think so, then surprise them." She seals each with wax, and you wonder when they'll read them. At her death? In some future crisis? Or tomorrow, when they're old enough to understand? And then the unthinkable happens. Word arrives that Prince George, barely a teenager, has fallen ill. You ride hard to the mountain monastery where he's being treated. Tamar is already there, beside his bed, her face still but pale. The boy survives, but only barely, and his recovery is slow. It's a cruel reminder that legacy is not always a path, it's often a battlefield. You begin to see a change in her. Not wariness, not fear, but urgency. She speeds up everything. Temples go up faster, roads finish sooner, new schools, hospitals, trading posts, all of them pushed through with relentless energy. It's like she's racing something only she can feel. And yet she makes time for her daughter. You catch a glimpse of her and Rusudan walking together through the palace gardens. Tamar is teaching her to read the Martyrdom of Shushanik. The girl listens, silent, until she asks, "Why did the queen stay instead of running?" Tamar answers, "Because some things must be stood for, not run from." And you realize in that moment, Rusudan is listening. Not just hearing, but absorbing. One day, she may have to rule. And Tamar is shaping her to do it, not as a copy, but as a continuation. And there's another secret Tamar carries. You learn from a monk in Vardzia that Tamar has quietly established a royal archive, not just for state records, but for memory. Personal writings, family history, a record not of her reign, but of her spirit. She doesn't want to be remembered as a flawless queen. She wants to be remembered honestly. One of the last entries you glimpse is addressed not to her children, but to Georgia itself. "If I have failed you, forgive me. If I have led you, walk forward. If you forget me, may it only be because you have become greater than I dreamed." You close the scroll, heart heavy, because you know what she knows. No reign lasts forever. But maybe, just maybe, if she builds carefully enough, writes wisely enough, loves fiercely enough, her children will inherit not her crown, but her fire. Enemies at the gates, Tamar's last war. It begins with smoke. You smell it before you see it, on the wind, drifting from the eastern passes. Word spreads like fire itself. A coalition of hostile Muslim emirs and renegade princes is advancing on the frontier. The peace Tamar's golden age secured is cracking at the edges. And now, once again, the queen must rise as commander. But this time, the stakes feel different. You're older now. So is she. And while the kingdom is still strong, wealthier, more cultured, more unified than ever, the world around it is changing fast. The Seljuks are fragmented but still dangerous. The Mongols loom like a shadow on the eastern steppe, not yet arrived but already whispered of in fearful tones. Even old allies like the Byzantines offer smiles too smooth and letters too warm. And the ones marching toward Tamar's kingdom now? They don't come for territory. They come for revenge. The army assembles quickly, leaner than before, but more elite. The veterans from Basian are there, some white-haired now, riding beside newer, younger commanders. Tamar watches from the walls of Tbilisi as they pass in review. Her expression is unreadable, but her knuckles are pale on the railing. She doesn't speak of fear, but you know she feels the gravity. She meets with her generals in secret. Zakaria is gone now, passed quietly some years earlier, but his son Shalva rides in his place. You meet him, sharp-eyed, respectful, burning with the same loyalty his father once showed. Tamar holds his hand before he departs. "To guard Georgia is to guard my soul," she says. The battle begins near Dmanisi. You're not there when the first clash happens, but the accounts come back like thunder. The enemy force is larger than expected. Mercenaries from across Anatolia, rogue Persian lords, zealots stirred by preachers who curse Tamar's reign as a heresy. They bring fire, they bring fury. But what they don't bring is discipline. The Georgian army, drilled by decades of Tamar's investment, holds tight formations. They bait the enemy into rough terrain, use the valleys like traps. Shalva leads a counterstrike under moonlight, flanking the attackers and burning their supply lines. You hear one captured commander spit as he's questioned. We were promised a shattered kingdom. Instead, we found an empire with teeth. Still, it isn't easy. Fortresses fall. Border towns are razed. You visit one days after its capture, only the church remains standing. A single old woman lights candles for the dead. When you ask her how she survived, she replies, "Because Tamar did not abandon us." And indeed, she did not. She doesn't ride into battle, but she rides closer. Establishes her command post in Bolnisi near the war zone. From there, she holds court in a converted monastery, issuing orders with speed and clarity. Her messengers become a blur across mountain roads. And at night, she writes letters to the families of the fallen, edicts to rebuild villages before the embers have cooled. You read one, addressed to a young widow. Your husband died guarding the light of Georgia, and now that light is yours to keep. The war turns. The enemy forces, divided by greed and lacking unity, begin to fracture. Several smaller emirs sue for peace. Others retreat when their fortresses are surrounded not by siege engines, but by priests and engineers, offering food and rebuilding supplies to civilians. Tamar wins the war not just by sword, but by rehumanizing the battlefield. And then comes the final blow. Shalva Makar-Grzeli, leading a swift mountain strike, captures the enemy's command tent in a daring night raid. You're told he rode with only 30 men. They took the camp by silence, not force. The coalition collapses within days. Georgia stands, again. You return to Kutaisi, riding ahead of the army. Tamar meets you in the inner court, and for the first time in years, you see her cry. Not for relief, but for those lost. She orders a service for every soldier fallen, regardless of rank, carves their names into a massive stone tablet set into the walls of Galati Monastery. There are hundreds, but each name matters, because Tamar believes legacy is not in monuments, but in memory. The people flood the streets, singing the same songs once raised after Basian. But now, their voices are deeper, wiser. And when they chant her name, it doesn't sound like jubilation. It sounds like prayer. That night, you pass by the royal chapel and see her kneeling before a single candle. Her hair is streaked with silver now. Her hands tremble slightly as she crosses herself. You realize this may be her last war. And that's when it hits you. Georgia is not only safe because of her strength. It is safe because she taught it how to survive without her. The laws, the roads, the soldiers, the scribes, the children, the bishops, the tax systems, the hospitals, everything she built is a shield that doesn't need her to hold it. That is victory. And in the silence of that candlelit chapel, as the last of the war smoke clears across the valleys of the Caucasus, you finally see Tamar not as a monarch or a saint or even a mother. You see her as a guardian. And you wonder, what happens when the guardian finally rests? The queen's final winter. The snow comes early that year. It falls in silent veils over the tiled roofs of Kutaisi, softening the sharp lines of fortress walls and cloaking the city in stillness. Inside the palace, candles burn longer. Cloaks are worn tighter. And in the royal quarters, Queen Tamar walks more slowly than she once did. You notice it first in her hands. The fingers that once signed a dozen decrees before breakfast now tremble slightly as she lifts a goblet. Her voice remains strong, her mind untouched, but her body, her frame, moves like stone eroded by waves. The court pretends not to see, or maybe they don't want to believe it. She's never faltered. Not in battle, not in grief, not even when kings called her blasphemous. But now, her steps echo differently in the marble halls. Less command, more memory. You sit with her one evening in her study, firelight dancing over walls lined with scrolls. She smiles as she reads a letter from a boy in Tbilisi who thanks her for a new school built after the war. She reads it twice, then sets it down and says, almost to herself, "This is what I will leave behind. Not crowns, not armies, but minds." It's not a farewell, but you feel the shape of it forming. She begins to speak more often of succession. Prince George, now grown, is ready in the eyes of many, strong, articulate, but still uncertain in Tamar's presence. He doesn't speak much when she is near. He listens. You watch the two of them walk the palace gardens one last time. Tamar points at trees, at corners of the wall, as if labeling pieces of her soul. This stone is older than our kingdom. The lilacs bloom late here, just like your sister used to. You wonder if she's trying to teach him the kingdom through its smells and shadows, not its maps. And Rusudan, bold, brilliant Rusudan, is still by her side. Tamar calls her into meetings, asks her opinion, lets her challenge laws in front of nobles. It's unorthodox. But so was Tamar once. And now, that spark lives on in her daughter. Still, not everything is secure. Tensions simmer at the edges. Distant lords question whether George has the mettle. Some whisper that Rusudan might stir ambitions of her own. Foreign courts, sensing Tamar's fading presence, resume their smiles and their knives. But the queen moves with urgency now. She invites governors and generals for private audiences, not to command, but to bless. She walks the halls of Gelati Monastery one last time, placing a single coin at the foot of each column, saying nothing as she does. One night, you find her at her writing desk, finishing a final letter. You peer over her shoulder and see the salutation, "To those who remember me." She does not finish it. She sets down the quill and stares out the window toward the mountains. It's the last time you see her write. Soon after, her health fades rapidly. She withdraws to a smaller chamber near the chapel. Not for privacy, but peace. Priests chant softly behind drawn curtains. Family gathers in shifts. You're among the few permitted to sit with her near the end. She does not ask for comforts, only for silence. And then, on a morning wrapped in frost as the sun cuts thin lines through a snow-covered window, no spectacle, no deathbed command, just a quiet exhale, and the world shifts. You expect chaos, but it does not come. Her systems hold. Her court weeps. Yes, the cities go still, but her kingdom endures. Because she made it to. She shaped it like clay and then set it like marble, and now it stands. Her body is laid to rest at Gelati, though no one can say precisely where. The burial is secret by her own instruction. She didn't want a tomb of gold or a monument of pride. She wanted to become Georgia. Soil, stone, spirit. And so she does. People gather from every corner. Kipchaks, Armenians, Greeks, Persians, Jews, Muslims, Christians. They chant her name not in royal terms, but as mother, teacher, defender. The mourning is vast, but it doesn't feel like the end. It feels like the start of something permanent. And even centuries later, when invaders burn the libraries and empires fall around the Caucasus like dominoes, stories of her still pass between hands in secret. You once read a peasant's carving that said, "In Tamar's time, the trees bowed lower. Even the river listened." You sit beneath one of those trees now, and you believe it, because you lived through her reign. You saw a woman rise, alone, against the iron weight of custom, religion, empire, and war. And she bent them, and then she blessed them. And then she let go. The kingdom without its queen, the bells still toll. Weeks after her passing, their echo still rolls through the hills and cities of Georgia. Tamar is gone, but her name is on every lip, etched into every stone, whispered in every prayer. But now comes the true test. Because a golden age doesn't announce its end with a thunderclap. It fades, slowly, almost imperceptibly, until the people left behind must decide. Will they live up to the light she left? Prince George IV, now crowned, sits on the same throne where Tamar once commanded armies and empires. But he does not carry her gravity, not yet. He's tall, proud, earnest, but untested. The robes seem too large, the court too sharp, and you can feel the mood shifting. There's no rebellion, no betrayal, just unease. Nobles glance more carefully at one another in council. Governors double-check letters from the capital. The caravan masters ask, will the trade roads stay open? The priests murmur, will the queen's charities remain funded? Because Tamar, for all her majesty, ruled with personal authority. Unshakable. And when you remove that center, the wheel wobbles. George tries. He speaks Tamar's words, holds her ceremonies, maintains the court musicians, the translators, the engineers. But you can see the strain. He doesn't sleep well. He doesn't command silence with a look like she did. And when he rules, he waits too long for applause. And yet, there are glimmers. You watch him intervene in a land dispute in Guria, favoring a widow over a noble. Bold, risky, just like she would have done. And the people respond. They chant his name, not with the same reverence as Tamar's, but with hope. Then tragedy strikes. George falls ill, quickly and cruelly. Doctors from Constantinople and Baghdad are summoned, but none can stop the wasting. Whispers ripple across the palace. The air is fading, and the queen is already gone. Now what? You walk the corridors at night and hear the old guards mutter to themselves. Some suggest elevating a general. Others look to Tamar's daughter, Rusudan, and that's when she returns. Rusudan. No longer the curious girl from the garden, she arrives in Kutaisi, cloaked in black, her voice low and clear. She doesn't demand power. She waits, watches, and when George breathes his last, still in his 20s, the kingdom does not fracture, because before his death, he does what Tamar once did for him. He names a successor. He names her. And Georgia holds its breath. You're there when the court confirms her. No civil war, no foreign invasion, just quiet acceptance and a touch of awe. Because the nobles remember Tamar, and Rusudan carries her same gaze, her same walk, her same fire. But she is not a replica. Her court becomes leaner, sharper, more guarded. She knows what her mother faced, and she has learned not to expect adoration, only resistance. She reigns, not as Tamar reborn, but as Rusudan forged. And yet, Tamar's name never leaves the palace. You see it in every decree, in the tradition of Queen Tamar, in every church dedication, built in the time of Tamar, beloved of Christ, in every oath sworn by her children and grandchildren. By her memory, I serve this kingdom. She becomes more than a monarch. She becomes a measuring stick, a golden mirror, a whisper behind every law, every battle cry, every schoolchild's psalm. Even foreign courts take note. Papal letters continue to arrive, always referencing the House of Tamar. Muslim scholars in Persia speak of her reign with wary admiration. Armenian poets call her the second Solomon. And in the villages, the farmers still say, the land was warmer when she ruled. Decades pass. Invaders come, the Mongols, the Ottomans, the Timurids. The golden age dims. The stones crack. But no conqueror ever forgets her name. Even in ruins, they find her inscriptions carved into bridges and fortresses and the corners of churches. Even centuries later, when Georgia is divided, its kings diminished, its cities scarred, peasants still name their daughters Tamar. Not for fashion, but for remembrance. You find yourself in a mountain monastery long after her death, staring at a crumbling fresco. Her eyes still shine. A monk nearby whispers, "She ruled when we were giants." And that's the truth. Tamar didn't just rule a kingdom. She created a standard, a living blueprint, a legend that would haunt every crown that came after, because no one could match it. But perhaps no one was meant to. Perhaps she was a moment, a perfect, roaring fire in the middle of 1,000 years of fog. And now the embers glow quietly in every corner of Georgia, in the prayers of the faithful, in the scrolls of the scribes, in the blood of her children. The queen is gone, but the kingdom remembers. Why Tamar still matters. You return to the place where it all began, Gelati. The wind curls through the arches. The golden mosaics glint in the late afternoon light. A choir rehearses in the distance, their voices low and echoing. You walk the corridors slowly now. You're older, but the story, that story, still burns behind your eyes. Tamar is long gone. Her bones rest somewhere beneath these stones, hidden from time, from plunder, from pride. But her presence? It lingers in every carved inscription, in every arch built under her orders, in every silence the walls seem to hold in reverence. Because while other monarchs ruled lands, Tamar ruled meaning. And meaning doesn't rot. What is it exactly that still binds her to memory? Why do schoolchildren in Georgia still recite her name with awe? Why do pilgrims still walk the mountain trails she traveled, stopping at roadside shrines where she once knelt? It's not just nostalgia. It's not just history. It's that in a world where kings built with iron and ruled by fear, Tamar built with trust. She showed a kingdom, no, a region, that mercy isn't weakness, that a woman could wear the crown not as an ornament, but as a weapon, a shield, a key. She never needed to shout. She never had to ride into battle. Her power didn't scream. It radiated. And what about her legacy? Even in her lifetime, poets ran out of metaphors for her. The sun, the rose, the lion, the morning star, none of them quite captured what she was. Because she wasn't just a symbol of power. She was transformation itself. Under Tamar, Georgia became more than a patchwork of provinces. It became an identity, a culture, a fire that lit even the darkest corners of the Caucasus. Her reign wasn't just successful, it was aspirational. And when it ended, the world changed. Empires rose and fell. Mongols swept through like locusts. The Ottomans turned their gaze east. Kingdoms collapsed, borders blurred. But somehow, her legend didn't fade. Because her story is the kind you pass on around fires, the kind that lingers in lullabies, the kind that makes even hardened warriors pause before laying siege to her memory. Tamar matters now because she didn't just build a kingdom that worked. She built a kingdom that believed in justice, in education, in inclusion, in balance, in the quiet miracle of faith and reason living side by side. She planted those seeds in a medieval world drenched in blood, and they bloomed. And even now, centuries later, when you walk through the streets of Tbilisi, or listen to the wind at Vardzia, or trace your fingers along the stone at Svetitskaveli, you can feel it. She's still here, not as a ghost, as a standard. So if you've ever doubted that history remembers greatness, look to Tamar. If you've ever wondered whether wisdom can hold its own against war, look to Tamar. And if you've ever questioned whether one person can change the course of generations by the sheer force of vision, will, and faith, then you already know her name. Tamar of Georgia. The king who was a queen. The queen who became a legend. And the legend that became eternal. Final cool down. So, after 15 parts, we've walked together through the fire and frost of Queen Tamar's Georgia, through her coronation, her battles, her heartbreak, and her transformation from underestimated daughter to eternal monarch. What began with a nervous teenager, doubted by her own nobles, became one of the most celebrated reigns in medieval history. She never needed to draw a sword. She didn't conquer with fear. Instead, she built an empire with principle. One stone, one verse, one law at a time. Her story reminds us that strength doesn't always roar, that greatness doesn't have to be loud, that dignity, when held long enough, becomes unbreakable. And maybe that's why Tamar still speaks to us across centuries. She's not just a figure in stained glass or stone. She's the proof that leadership rooted in wisdom, justice, and courage can reshape nations, can reshape memory. Her name is still carved into the soul of a people, not because she forced them to remember, but because she earned it. Thanks for listening to this incredible journey through time. If it moved you, taught you, or surprised you, let me know in the comments. I read everyone, really. And hey, before you go, subscribe if you haven't already, like the video if you felt that spark, and share this with someone who needs a little reminder of how one voice can echo through history. Finish the script, enjoy listening, and subscribe to the channel for the next video.